Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi to all of you. My name's Kelvin Cloud. I'm the chair of the Wastewater Management Review Committee, and welcome to all of the members and also members of the public who may be interested, and also those watching on YouTube. We're going to start off with a karakia. So who would like to do that for it? Mātari? Thank you, Mātari. Thank you very much. I want to make a special welcome to our new members on the committee. Yako Arbry, Councillor. Welcome, Yako, and also Heidi Hughes, who will be here with us shortly. It's great to have some new faces, along with some of the older faces, Councillor Morris and myself. So welcome. And also, Erina, you're still relatively new, so welcome to you as well, Erina. Now, apologies. We have an apology for lateness from Councillor Heidi Hughes, and I understand Carlton as well. So I will move that we accept those apologies, and seconded by Mātari. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. There is no one booked for the public forum, and there are no late items to be accepted. There's no confidential business to be transferred into the open, and I don't believe there's any need to change the order of business at this point. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? No. Thank you. So moving right into the business of the day, and the first one, 7.1, is the appointment of Deputy Chairperson. We can make this very long, or we can cut straight to the chase. We have there a recommendation to reappoint Ms. Marjorie Duncan as the Deputy Chairperson of the Wastewater Management Review Committee. So I'm going to move A and B. If anyone would like to second that, Councillor Morris. Is there any discussion? Speak now or forever hold thy peace. Thank you. So I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Congratulations, Marjorie, and thank you so much for your continuing commitment to the kaupapa. Thank you. Right, 7.2, the wastewater activities report. Radley, have you got a presentation set to go? So we look forward to that. Thank you.
Kia ora. So this report is around just giving some updates on the various projects and streams that are currently underway. So I'm going to be talking about the plans for the desludging of the sludge pond at Tamanga, how the UV plant's running, a little bit on the upgrade to the final effluent pipeline, the monitoring program that we have over the summer as part of the consent, an update on where the 5-yearly review report is at, and also just a little thing on the regional best practice guidelines for wastewater overflows. And then either myself or Jane will discuss around the upgrade to the landward section of the outfall and what's been happening with the review of the marine section. So the desludging of Pond 1, we had looked at potentially having to get a variation to the consent for the seepages that come from Pond 1. We've had some, as you can see, there is a very recent picture of Pond 1 there, and with the dry weather we've had, and with the pond being offline for the upgrade to the final effluent pipeline, you can see that it's really dried out quite a lot over the summer period. That's given us some indication about some other management tools that we might have in terms of keeping the seepages under that limit when we get to the desludging of the pond, and so there'll be some further work with whoever tenders for that project around how we can manage those throughout the project to keep under the current conditions in the consent. So we've sort of put that variation on the back burner. we did have a look at potentially whether we could use the opportunity at the moment with the pond so dry, but the issue there is we've got a figure that we have to meet in terms of the dry solids, and even though it's so dry, we probably would still have to dewater it. So we're just going with the current time frame that we have for the desludging, which I think we're looking to tender sort of middle of the year, and start work on that sort of towards the end, Octoberish sort of time. The UV plant has been operational since I think since our previous committee meeting, when we had the new system up and running, a bank of lights working. That's still the case. We've had a couple of times when it's had to go offline for various things, but the new system and the new control system that we put in place is working well. So those lights have been on. We still need to do further work on other banks of lights to build in some resilience there. But yeah, so far so good. And just a quick update on the final effluent pipeline. So the upgrade is currently on target to finish July 2020. They've still got the pipeline to go up what we call tip lane, the lane that comes up from the ponds towards the plant. But progress is going really well with that. They've been able to speed up certain sections because of the dry weather we've had, so we've had to do less dewatering. They've sped the process up. So the summer monitoring program that we have tour collections in February, essentially in a 5 kilometre line with the outfall in the middle of that 5 kilometres, where we take at half kilometre sections. We have mussels that we collect from the outfall diffuser itself to give us like a real specific baseline, I suppose, of potential effects. And we have the receiving water monitoring that sort of mirrors where we collect the tours, but actually out at the distance of the outfall diffuser. All those results so far, we've still got March to do for the receiving water, but all the results that we've got so far have shown no indication of any potential effects from that discharge, which is fairly consistent with what we see each year. Certainly for the receiving water, the results that we've been getting are almost, well, we don't do zeros, we do less thans, but they're sort of as low as we can record with the testing. So the next thing is the 5-yearly review report. So as some of you may know, we got a draft from Becca sort of August last year that we went through in a workshop, and since that time we've been working with the Tangata Whenua members of the committee to put together a cultural report that will accompany that draft. We'll make some recommendations that we can incorporate into the draft, and we're hoping to bring that to you sort of towards the end of March in a workshop to go through it. Most of the work's been done on it now. We've just got the consultants that are putting together a report doing that, so we should have a draft fairly soon. Once we've got that, obviously we'll incorporate it all in, and then it has to go to the regional council. And the last thing that I had was around the best practice guidelines. So that was a joint effort between all the TAs and the regional council over the previous sort of year, and it's really just to standardise how we're, I suppose, responding, reporting and notifying stakeholders and partners that we need to when we do get a wastewater overflow, and these are mainly dry weather overflows caused by blockages. Obviously, over the region, there's a big variation in terms of how councils are responding. I like to think TCC was probably on the above average side in terms of their response, but we've tried to standardise that into a process that all the councils can follow, incorporate into their processes, and it enables the regional council to have a real good understanding about what's happening in each of each of the districts in terms of those overflows. The one thing that we do still need to do with those guidelines is go to local iwi and hapu and sort of ask around that notification process for them, the follow-up that they're looking for, and how we might incorporate that. So that's a specific thing that each council has to do. So I've already had some discussions with the members of the committee around how we might roll that sort of engagement out, how we might get that feedback. There we go. Yep. So the landward section outfall upgrade. So TCC have received the cultural impact assessment from Ngā and we've had a review of that and the recommendations that are in that report, and we've put together some responses that we're discussing with Ngā currently. We're still awaiting sign-off from MPBI prior to lodging the application for the earthworks. But I think everything's still progressing as we thought. Do you have anything you wanted to add? Okay. So the marine outfall review. Jane? Okay. So you'd be aware that we're currently looking at a number of options and which might be the best for council to proceed, going from relining or retrofitting the current pipeline, which is allowed for under the current discharge consent, although all the enabling works would need to be consented, or a straight out replacement and what that might look like. So we're still very much in the planning and consenting phase, but there are some works that we need to do to try and see whether the relining option is viable. Currently, you might be aware that due to the, I suppose the state the current pipeline is in, we're not able to achieve the maximum flows that we're allowed to under the consent, and so we need to look at a way we can get closer to that as growth and the obvious wet weather events that happen are causing some pressure points there for us. So the current focus is around seeing whether that relining option is actually viable, and that's sort of from just. Have I got a pointer? Try that one. Yeah, so that's from sort of the landward section upgrade would finish around here. And so we're talking about this section from just south of Marinuri Street up to the length of the outfall, which is 950 metres out. So yes, we're looking at a feasibility study for the relining. CCTV we're looking at having done by the end of May, as long as we get the weather conditions for that. And we're also looking at those enabling works that we might need to get consented. So that's what we would do with the discharge while we were relining, access track to enable us to get the equipment that we need to reline to the beach manhole, which is our sort of access point currently for the pipeline. We're engaging with landowners around how that might work, and also with Ngā Pōtiki in terms of cultural impacts assessment. We've had discussions with the other tangata whenua members of the committee around their input into that CIA as well. And then there's the hydraulic assessments around how the different options might affect the amount that the Tamanga can discharge, and those wet weather events, etc. Oh yes, the photo. So I was looking around for a graph and I couldn't find a decent photo, so I got this, and I got told that my last photo that I had was a bit obscure, so I looked for a more obscure one. So this is some work that we did in that dune area. It was around trying to find whether that we had any katapo living in this part of the dune system. So it's under our sort of layers in GIS as being a significant ecological area for Katapo, and but we need to find out whether that was true or whether we had any or not. So, yeah, it's a Katapo house really. So we had an expert come up from the South Island, and he had a look round and said, perfect habitat, but I can't find any. So this was the next best option. And essentially what happens is the corrugation heats up, so it provides a nice warm environment. The gaps between the corrugations allow the spiders to create their web and do what they do to try and catch bugs. And so it's perfect habitat essentially, and so if there were Katapo around, that's where they would choose to live. So just a little aside. No, not so far. They're still out there, so we've got to, obviously give a reasonable amount of time. Yeah. So that's essentially the updates. If there's any questions.
It'd be quite helpful for us just to get a copy of the cultural impact assessment for the landwood. Just if you can email it to us, please, that would be quite helpful just to see that.
Yep, I'll do that.
Oh, and our response if we've given one already. Thank you. Yep. Yeah, to all of us. Thank you. Yep. Any other questions from Carlton? Welcome.
Framework, an engagement with iwi and hapu on that. I was engaged last year on that and put forward through some recommendations to the framework document. Was that part of your engagement, or was that a one-off?
We currently have a mitigation and response plan, and that's included in a consent that has a condition around a 5-yearly review, which is different to the 5-yearly review that we were talking about earlier. So that engagement that you had was around that old report. We would definitely be taking those recommendations through into any process we also just need to check that the new one, if there's anything else that comes out of it. So yes, that engagement isn't, the information you gave will be used, but we just need to check that there's nothing else that's come up through that new guideline as well. So.
Yeah, I'm just mindful that those recommendations that I put forward need to be engaged quick smart, and they were the option for tangata whenua that were affected by an overflow spill to do a cultural impact assessment on the effects of the spill, because there's nothing in the process like that, and that if you're testing water in the ocean or a river for effects of the spill, you should be testing the biology as well. So I'm just mindful that there's been quite a lot of spills since then, and yet those processes are not there. So, and some of them have been serious, and I contacted one of the hapu who, and I suppose it's an email thing, but they are the environment rep for that hapu, and they didn't receive any notification. And so I'll talk to you about who that was. Maybe it's
if we
missing
can
off
catch
the
up about
email
that,
trail.
then I can make sure that doesn't happen again.
Kia ora, Carlton. Can I just check that this relates to the regional best practice guidelines? Is that what you're talking about? So has that feedback been put into that?
Yeah. So the guidelines were done pretty much in parallel with that review. So they will need to be incorporated into the iwi and hapu response that's incorporated into the next new guidelines.
Yako, Councillor Arbery.
This might be a dumb question, but can you just explain again to me where the testing was done? Was that around the outfall itself? Was that in the harbour? Or was that alongside the pipeline? Where was that done?
So if you think about the outfall going out in a straight line, the testing is done for tuatua along the beach in half-kilometre sections, 2.5 kilometres each side of the outfall and on the outfall. And then the receiving water is done exactly the same, but in line with the diffuser. 950 metres out, yeah. And then the other shellfish collection is done actually on the diffuser itself.
Thank you, Radley. What were the results of the mussels and the tuatua?
So they were all under the consented limits, essentially. There were no significant increases from last year either. They were.
Does that get reported to us in an actual report in the next month or two?
We can. I've been in discussions with the consent monitor around. We used to do a wastewater annual report, and it might be a nice idea to incorporate all these things back into one of those. We haven't done it properly for 4 or 5 years, but I think it would be beneficial to start that up again. So, yes, we can.
Thank you. Would that find favour with the committee, just to have those, I think it's good just to cite them. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Arbery.
So, has the tests, do they trend? Are there spikes? What's the long-term testing averages, or?
So, as an example, the receiving water testing generally, we measure for enterococcus because that's the indicator species for salt water, and the results are generally somewhere between less than 10 and 20. So that's essentially as low as we can record because the testing is 1 in 10, so that's why we have a less than 10. You get the odd one that has something, but generally they're all less than 10. The tuatua, again, are we get very similar results year on year. We're not seeing any spikes in metals or anything like that. They're essentially your baseline metals that you would have in shellfish.
Thank you, Radley. Any other questions? So we have a recommendation on page 5 to receive the report. Would someone like to move that we receive it? Erina, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Morris. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thanks very much, Radley. And Radley, you're on again. 7.3, and this relates to the draft Environmental Mitigation Enhancement Fund Policy Manual. Thank you.
I'm only going to move on very quickly here, really just to give some background and introduction. Probably July, if I go back, we have the Environmental Mitigation Enhancement Fund that's part of the consent conditions for the discharge, and there's a fund that can be used to look at mitigation and environmental enhancement in the harbour and specifically, around the upper harbour, so Rangitoa Bay. That fund has had a couple of applications out of it back in 2013, but I think over time, when the applications that were coming in, it was the committee. I don't want to put words in the committee's mouth, but there was some issues with how that application process was happening, who was able to apply for the fund in terms of the expertise they needed to put a application together and that kind of thing. So it was agreed that the committee would look at those original guidelines around the fund and potentially change them. So over the last 18 months, the Tangata Whenua members of the committee have been working to review those guidelines and come up with a policy manual that would enable us to get those applications back up and running and get the fund being used for what it's designed for. So I think on that note, I'll hand over to Erina and Matari.
Kia ora, Radley. Yes, I suppose for the benefit of some of the newer members of the committee, this work has sort of been underway for a little while, and I think in the last 6 months of last year, the tangata whenua members were engaging fairly regularly with Radley's assistance to make some progress around these draft guidelines and form to essentially get the fund up and running. So that's where we are essentially now. We have a draft, and the next step, as Radley's indicated, is really to bring the committee together for a workshop so that the other members of the committee can get a bit more idea around some of our thinking, and we can workshop where those guidelines might actually end up as a final document to be adopted by this committee, hopefully at some stage in the near future. So, yeah. I don't know if any of my other...
We're still in discussion about when we can fit that in. The workshop in March is around the cultural report, but it will be sometime between here and the next one.
I think with our break around obviously these committee meetings, ideally we'd like to have the workshop before the next committee meeting and be in a position to actually adopt those guidelines at the next meeting.
Kia ora, yeah, that would be ideal if that's possible.
That's the intention, but Robin's looking at me like...
Thank you. I do have a few specific issues I was going to cover, but I think I'll wait till the actual workshop. I think that might be the place to do it, because then we can get into some real nitty-gritty and some of those ones that might require more discussion and dialogue. So I'll hold my fire on that. Any other comments on the process? Looks like, I mean, certainly I applaud tangata whenua members for really getting into this, especially in the last 6 months. It has certainly dragged on for a long time, so I really appreciate the effort that you've put in collectively to get to this point. So look forward to the workshop. Yep. Any other points or discussion? Thank you. So we have a recommendation to receive this draft Environmental Mitigation Enhancement Fund Policy Manual. Would someone like to move that? Moved by Whitty and seconded by Mātari. Thank you. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Well, that seems too easy. There's no late items, and so we'll close the meeting with a karakia. So who would like to do that? Someone come, Carlton. That's the role of you. Thank you. Many. Thank you very much. Oh, I meant to say, I'm very sorry, I forgot to introduce Raj Naidu, who is our committee advisor, who's also new. So welcome, Raj. You've done a great job. We kept it simple for you the first time.
Appreciate it.
So I'm just going to check. That's fine, you just. So that concludes the meeting, and thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you, staff. Radley, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say I ordered some food, but not for 1:30, so I might have to just go duck see if there is anything. But I thought we might want to have a chat. So.